So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Nathaniel, Scott and Stephanie's son, and I'm speaking to you today because this is Mission Sunday and I went on the medical mission trip to Honduras last spring. And I learned a lot on that trip, and I'm still wrestling with a lot of questions that I have concerning it and trying to reconcile the two different worlds. But for the sake of time today, I narrowed it down to 3 things that I've learned that I want to share with you guys. And as soon as my computer loads, I'll share them. All right. So last spring we flew into San Pedro Sula, Honduras, and took a long bus ride to Trujillo, where we stayed just outside Trujillo most of the time, and we made daily trips to the village of Guadalupe Carne, where we did the medical mission work that Diana briefly mentioned. And there was, whenever we say mission work, it really was work. It was a challenge, but God gave us strength throughout the whole thing. And through that, I'm gonna go through the 3 things that I've learned. So my first point that I learned is that we all have a calling. Last year, I was looking for a mission to get into. I wanted to do something, I prayed about several things, but nothing seemed to be something that I was really strongly called to. And then all of a sudden, my mom, bless her heart, wait, does that mean that people never mind. Okay, so my mom had this idea. She had been praying, and she felt called that our family should do together. She wanted to find something that we could all do. And so she talked to the whole family, and we figured we would pray about it and see what happened. Things didn't work out for the whole family to go. We didn't feel so we were quite ready for everybody to go. This wasn't exactly the right thing for everybody, but my mother, my brother Wes, who's in praise band today, and I figured that we would go. Especially me and Wes, were a bit reluctant. I mean, we don't know anything about medicine. We're high school kids. What could we possibly do? And I prayed about it a lot. And the more I prayed about it, the more I felt like I should go. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't want to go. And I didn't feel adequate to go or qualified to go. But everybody has a call, and I hadn't found anything else at that point. So, could this be it? I guess I thought maybe. And the specific way that I was called, I was trying to think back and remember. I was having a tough time. But then I went into work yesterday, and there's a specific man where I work at a restaurant, and it's right on the square, and there's this one specific man who's homeless and sits across from the courthouse all day. And he comes over 2 or 3 times a day asking for food and water. And it made me remember that around the same time as I was trying to figure out if this was my call, that's when he just sort of showed up out of nowhere and came in every day consistently. My heart really went out to him. And it sort of opened my eyes to poverty, which is very real in this country, but especially in other countries. And that's sort of when I realized maybe this is what I'm called to do. And all throughout the New Testament especially, it's reaffirmed we all have a call. We all need to be doing something. God has a plan for each one of us that he wants us to follow. And that's the first point. I think we're all in agreement there. So the second point is that we can fail to accept that call. I'm making the distinction here, it's very important. We can't fail at what God has called us to do, but we can fail to accept that call. This relates back to the Exodus reading about Moses. And I have an interesting perspective here, I think. Moses was called to speak. He did not want to speak, so God showed him signs. He turned his staff into a snake, and he turned his hand into a leper's hand, and then immediately turned it back. And he spoke to him in a loud, audible voice. like I'm speaking to you. Moses physically heard God speak and tell him to do something, and he still rejected the call to speak, and God was angry. A lot of people talk about scripture where Peter was called out onto the water, and he didn't have faith. He could see God physically in front of him. He saw Jesus, and Jesus called him out of the water, and he still didn't have faith. The same parallel sort of applies here, where Moses had probably the strongest call to go do something of any human being I know of. Throughout the Bible, throughout today's world, he had physical signs, miracles made just for him, telling him to go do, and he did not. How easy then is it for us today, whenever there are still miracles, but most of us are called through gut feelings or through the mouth of other believers, or we hear a whisper during prayer. How easy is it to shirk that off and just not do it? I'm there, I'm lazy, I'm a college student. I got stuff to do. I don't have time, I have a job. It's so easy, so incredibly easy to just not respond to the call. And I really didn't want to go to Honduras for a long time. I felt like I was called, but I felt, again, inadequate. There's nothing that I could have done, I felt like. Realistically, why would a high school student be on a medical mission trip? I haven't been to college, medical school, no skills. I took like 2 years of high school Spanish. I learned how to ask to go to the bathroom, that's about it. But I wanted to just blow off the call. I felt it would have been so easy. But that brings me to my third point, which is what made me really realize, okay, I guess I'm going now. The third point is that through reading and through experience, God will never let you fail at something He's truly called you to do. After you accept the call and you pray for the courage to go do it, He won't let you fail. Now, a lot of times, some of you may feel discouraged. You've tried something in the past, and there I personally identify with this, that you felt called to do, and it was a failure. It wasn't a failure if God calls you to do it. Even things that appear to be failures, in our point of view, like if you go on a mission trip and you didn't help that many people, if the doctors weren't able to see that many patients, the patients didn't do so well afterwards, it appears to be a failure. If you go out and you buy food for the homeless and you set up on the square and you're ready to give it out and nobody shows up, it seems like a failure. But if God called you to do that, He has a reason for it. Some of you might know about something that people call the butterfly effect, and if you're a sci-fi fan and you watch time travel movies, you've probably heard them talk about it. Well, what that is certain physicists talk about how the world is so complex and there's so much going on that the wind from the wing flap of one butterfly could completely change through a chain reaction the course of history. Things are so interrelated with each other and so complex that our failures might just be setting up the success of tomorrow, or 100 years from now, or whatever God has planned. Because the God of the universe can see a little bit further ahead than I can. So don't be discouraged. Don't think that God will let you fail if He's called you to something. And I personally found this is through experience and through reading in the scripture. On the mission, I knew very little Spanish, but by the end of the week, I am a slow learner most of the time, but I was able to help out like significantly in the pharmacy, where the doctors would treat the patients and they would fill out a prescription and we would have to count the bills and give them bills and instructions and everything. I was actually able to communicate with people fairly easily by the end of the week. There were definitely some hang-ups and I had to run for Scott or Diane a couple of times. But I mean, I was actually helping do God's work in a foreign country, and that was just crazy to me. How did I get here was the biggest thought. How is this happening? But then in the scripture, it's just constantly reaffirmed. He won't let you fail. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles, just like that. Like not the Eagles of the 80s, but the Eagles who beat the Steelers. They will walk on mountain things. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in your weakness. Let's say that one again. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in your weakness. That is one of the most important verses to me in the entire Bible relating to mission. My power is made perfect. My grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in your weakness. God doesn't necessarily call the strongest, biggest man to move the heaviest thing, because that would seem realistic. God is a God of miracles. He calls unlikely people to do extraordinary things. Sometimes the reason you're called might be because you're a high school student who knows very little Spanish, so that whenever you do succeed, you know and everybody around you knows that it's because there's a powerful God doing powerful things on this earth, that it wasn't your own strength. So that's another thing I learned, never let your weakness be the reason that you don't accept the call. Your weakness is what makes his power perfect. God was going to give Moses, who was slow of tongue, he wasn't a good speaker, he was going to give him the power and the strength to speak and to be listened to. He gave him a serpent and a hand of leprosy to prove to him that he was going to, and he didn't. Moses didn't understand, or he didn't understand that his weakness was the reason God was calling him. We were all made for a purpose, and we were all made adequate for God's call. We were known at the beginning of time, before we were even together in our mother's wombs, and we had a call. We still have a call. And some of us have multiple calls, and you'll have callings your entire life. That's how it works. And I find it absolutely extraordinary, like exciting even. It makes me happy just thinking about it, that I was made this way for a reason. Lots of reasons. And I don't have to do it on my own. And I learned that on this mission trip. There were so many things. This mission trip opened my eyes to a world that people, I use the word in first world and third world. I realized how accurate that is. They seem like two completely different worlds. And some of us might be called there, some of us might be called to work in our own community, some of us are called to prayer. We're never too old, we're never too young, never too poor, never too busy to accept God's call. So looking at this logically, the first point was that we have a call. The second point is that we can fail if we reject that call. And the third point is that once we accept the call, we never will fail. And I learned this all through prayer and scripture and this mission trip. And so what does that mean practically? We're not all going to load up on a boat and ship to Honduras. That's not practical. But what it does mean is that we as a church, which I think we do pretty well already in mission, but as a church and as individuals, I think it's really important that we continue this mission work and continue to improve the way we treat the people around us. We can't forget about the guy who sits at the courthouse and comes in asking for food. We can't forget about the little kids in Honduras who ask me for bouncing balls in Spanish. That's actually a funny story about that, if you have time afterwards. But besides that, there is so much work to be done, and I am excited that we get to be a part of it, and I'm excited that we can't fail. That's it.